Okay, good evening. I make it just a few minutes past, so we will begin, or people might enter. So welcome to the Introducing Buddhism course hosted by the Buddhist Society. My name is Olwen Smith, and you will see a little bit of info about me on the web page, but very quickly, I've been in education all my working life, and I have practiced and studied Buddhism for over 25 years now. So we're going to look at the first teachings of the Buddha that inform all traditions of Buddhism. Follow these teachings. These are the first basic teachings. Some of you may well have done this before, or something very similar. I don't know if anybody would like to just show a quick show of hands how many people have done this particular course before. I've got 3 pages of you, so I might just flip about. So I can see 1 or 2, that's all. A couple with the hands up, going on to another page. Okay, well, I'll come back. So just a few of you, I thought maybe more, but that's absolutely okay, because we will be basing these lessons as if you hadn't done it before. So that is the level that we are working at, but it's always, I think, from personal experience in Buddhism, it is vital almost, so certainly extremely useful to keep going back and to keep revisiting. It would be nice, especially when we come to the end of, I'm going to show you some slideshows. It would be nice, especially at the end of that, if we could see some faces. I've got lots of blank faces. That's okay, but it seems a bit odd just talking to names. Well, that's fine. If you feel comfortable to share your video, that would be nice, particularly later. So I'm going to do most for this evening, particularly most of my talking behind a slideshow. And the slides, they won't be lingering. They will be quite quick, and they're used, one, just to give you some visual information, some pictures, but also they're my notes as well. And the slides will be available to you to go through more quickly, more slowly if you wish, later. But not later tonight, but later, hopefully before next Monday. And but you'd need to register. So if you want access to any of the materials from this course, then please do register. It is still free if you do that. Okay, so I am going to share my screen with you. Now, hopefully you can't see my notes, just the slide. It's a 7-week course, but you'll notice there's 8 lessons on there. And that is, if it's needed, if it's wanted, there is a possibility of doing an 8th, more of a drop-in, more informal session. We can talk about that at the end of lesson 7, but that is a possibility. They are consecutive weeks. There are no holidays. And questions. There will be opportunities to put questions in the chat to Lavinia as the lesson goes on. You might want to wait till near the end of the lesson before you do that, in case you change your mind about the question, or the question gets answered as we are going along. But also, if you register, you will be able to put questions, post them into a folder that you will see next to the lessons. So you can put questions in there, and we can either answer them on week 8, or if they're particularly pertinent to the lesson that we're doing at the time, we can answer them then. It's always good practice as well to just hold on to your questions a little bit to see if the answer comes to yourself. But there are the opportunities there for you with the questions. So let's move on. And I'm assuming that one of the questions might be about further reading or listening to podcasts. What should you read? What should you listen to? And to be honest, I don't really like recommending books to people, because people's taste is so different. I love reading. I do a lot of reading, but people's preferred reading styles can be very different. So I just thought, before I showed you a list, some suggested books, let's just talk about how to choose some books on Buddhism. So choose them from people who are known to be Buddhist practitioners or were Buddhist practitioners. There's so much material out there, and some of it is absolutely fantastic. We really are very fortunate that all this is there available for us, but there's also some things that aren't as good. So try and make sure you're choosing it from somebody who does or did actually practice, and you'd know that from the blurb on the back, or Google them, or you can tell by the name. Or recommended books or audios from people who practice Buddhism, who've recommended not one of their books, but they've recommended some books. And also how to read or listen. We try not to read Dharma books or Buddhist books a bit like a novel. I mean, certainly you can read through first, but you might want to go back and chunk it up a bit, read it a bit more slowly, ponder it, think about, is it relevant? Does it make any sense to you? So having said all that, I've just put together some books there. They're my personal choice. They might not be yours. All of them are by Buddhist practitioners. You don't need to write them down or anything, because if you register, you can see them. But I have put a website on, Learn Religion website. I think it's very good for just going in and perhaps looking at some of the terms, the technical terms. And also the Dhammapada, which I'll be talking about later. I've highlighted one in yellow, and that's What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. And it's perhaps the most scholarly of the list there, and possibly the oldest, published, I think, in the 50s. But for these very first teachings, it's very clear, very concise, and is a classic, basically. And before we begin, the last thing I want to just mention are technical terms. The Buddha obviously did not speak English, so everything's been translated from ancient Indian languages, Sanskrit and Pali. And increasingly, I think we are using the original wording, because they are specific terms. They are referring to something very special, and it is not there in the English language. There are not direct words that correlate to those things. So we need to take a little bit of care with translations. And I think as in the West, we get to know and understand Buddhism a little bit better, I think we're changing view a little bit of some of these translations. So just to bear that in mind, that some technical terms will be used. So let's go straight on to what the Buddha actually taught. And we can sum this up in one sentence. I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. The word suffering is an English translation from the Sanskrit or Pali word dukkha. And this is exactly what I meant by we need to be careful with some of these translations, because perhaps suffering isn't the best translation of the word dukkha. To us, suffering has a very strong emotional or physical pain. But actually, when the Buddha was referring to dukkha, he actually was talking about a wheel being out of kilter. So if you imagine a wheel fitting, the axle fitting into the hub of the wheel, and it wasn't running smoothly, and you got that juddery, uncomfortable effect. So one thing, I teach one thing and one thing only, dukkha, and the end of dukkha, end of suffering or discomfort. We're talking a whole range of emotions, from being highly stressed, highly anxious, to just being that bit, don't know, feel a bit restless, feel a bit fed up, maybe that Monday morning kind of feeling. So that word is covering that whole range of feelings. And perhaps we could just reword that. This is my rewording. So life is difficult, but there is a way through these difficulties. Life is difficult. We have ups and downs, both personally and both on a larger arena. So that's what the Buddha's teachings are talking about. Put a quote in here from the Dalai Lama, who's a patron of the Buddhist Society, and different ways or paths. And the Dalai Lama said, if we view the world's religions from the widest possible viewpoint and examine their ultimate goal, we find all the major world religions, whether Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism, are directed to the achievement of permanent human happiness. Buddhism is not the only way. All the major religions are concerned with this, with the human condition. But we're interested in Buddhism, obviously, this evening, and how perhaps it differs from some of the other religions. So here we have a sutra. A sutra is a Buddhist teaching, a teaching from the Buddha, and it's called the Kalama Sutra. It's very famous and easily found if you wanted to look that up for yourself. And it reflects a little bit that statement that we've just read from the Dalai Lama, where the Dalai Lama is obviously a very important spiritual Buddhist teacher, and he's saying all the religions are offering a way for out of our suffering. And the Kalamas were a group of people, a tribe, who must have been living, their village must have been on a circuit where lots of religious teachers were visiting. And they must have got a bit fed up with this. The fact that, you know, one week somebody would come and teach to them and tell them that they were the ones they should follow, then the following week somebody else, and so on. And so when the Buddha came, they went to the Buddha and they said, look, you know, there's been others before you. What makes you different? Why should we be interested in your teachings or follow you? And the Buddha did not say, as one might expect, I'm the best. My teachings are the one. Ignore all the ones that have been before. He didn't say that. What he did say is, it was a very sensible question. And he said, do not accept anything just because, and then he lists a lot of things, just because you've heard it from somebody else. It was a very inspirational speaker, or you've heard it from a rumor, or indeed that it's written in scriptures, or this person is your teacher. Do not accept these things without examining them. He said, when you know for yourselves. If these things, you know for yourself that these things are bad and that they are censured by the wise, and if undertaken, they would lead to harm and ill to yourself and others, abandon them. However, he said, if you think these things are moral, blameless, and are praised by the wise, and are for the benefit of yourself and others' well-being and happiness, live with them accordingly. And that is something to underpin all the way through when you are looking at Buddhism. Look at the teachings. The Buddha actually said, test my teachings like a goldsmith tests gold. A lot of Westerners quite like this sutra. It is very well known, and they like it, I think, because they've misunderstood it and think what it's saying is ignore what you don't like and just take the bits you do like. And actually, it's not saying that. It's asking you to look at these things for yourself. So, how does Buddhism vary from other religions? Well, first of all, it's a learning that does not depend on words, but on experiencing. It's about you looking at these things and taking them on board, really, and affecting how you think and how you live. It doesn't say there are no words, there are teachings, but it says it doesn't depend on them. It's not a book-based religion, so there's no equivalent of the Bible or the Quran, but there are teachings, the sutras and the Dhammapada that I've already mentioned. Buddhism says there's a profound interconnectedness between all things, and we will look at that through the 7 weeks. And also that there is an inherent law that informs all things. What is this life about? What is this world about, this universe, this mystery? And a word that we're going to use for that is the word Dharma. So the Buddha means, it's a title, it means one who is awake. And the birth name of the Buddha was Siddhartha Gautama. And he's also known as Buddha Shakyamuni because he was of the Shakya clan. And it's his teachings and his understandings of the world around him that we now know as Buddhism. They are the foundations of all Buddhism. So they are the foundations of all the different schools of Buddhism. And here we've got the 3 main ones. And they look very different. We've got a Theravada monk, a Tibetan, and a Zen monk. And the way that they are dressed is very different. And the rituals that they may have are very different. And some of the strategies that they use to help us to understand the teachings will be different. But all those schools their basic teachings are the ones that we are doing through this 7-week course. Buddhism started in India and then China, Tibet, Japan, and now in the West. And it's got different forms because of different cultures, different environments, and it transplants well. It transplants well because actually it's talking about human beings. It's talking about the human heart, which is the same the world over. So although it might look different, it actually is all based on those same teachings. So back to who was the Buddha. So the conclusions, the teachings are based on conclusions he came to after deep reflection. And it's a non-theistic religion. There is no God in Buddhism. The teachings are not based on a belief on a creator God. So this makes it quite different. The Buddha was a human being, and he claimed no inspiration from an external God. He said that it was down to his own efforts. And it's also, Buddhism is saying to us that we, with our own efforts as well, can achieve these understandings. So no creator God. But I've already mentioned the word Dharma. And there you've got Dharma and Dhamma, different pronunciations and spellings, depending on whether we're looking at Pali or Sanskrit, but that is not to be concerned about. Unless you're particularly interested, in which case you can go and look things up. I'm mentioning the word again because it can have different meanings depending on the context. And it can mean the way things really are, the reality of the world, or it can mean the teachings that reflect that, or it can mean how we are living with that reality, the Buddha Dharma. Okay, so a little story. Lots of stories in Buddhism. They don't necessarily come from Buddhism. They come from all different cultures, but they are used in Buddhism to help us to understand something. So this is a story from Mullah Nasruddin, who was a Sufi mystic in the 13th century. And there are lots of his stories. They're lovely. They're often thought as just for children, but they have a wealth of wisdom as well for adults. Anyway, Mullah Nasruddin is outside under a lamp, scrabbling about in the dirt and the sand, obviously looking for something. And his neighbour comes up and says, "Have you lost something? You're looking for something?" And Nasruddin says, "Yes, I've lost something really valuable. I've lost a valuable family heirloom, a ring." So the neighbour, good neighbour, gets down on the ground and starts to look with Nasruddin. And they scrabble about in the sand and the dirt, searching high and low for this ring. And eventually the neighbour, having basically given up, stands up and says, "Was it here that you lost it?" To which Nasruddin says, "No, I lost it in the house, but the light is better out here." And often when we are upset or stressed by something, then like Nasruddin, we look in the easiest place. We can look outside for things, for the reasons why we feel disturbed or upset by something, or for something to distract us. What Buddhism is actually asking us to look somewhere where it's a little bit more difficult, and to look inside us for the reasons. This is a verse from the Dhammapada, and I recommend the Dhammapada, perhaps when you're a little bit more familiar with Buddhism, because sometimes they can need a little bit of help to interpret it. But they are a collection of small verses that come directly, are said to come directly from the Buddha. And this is one of them. And I thought it just helped us along with through this course, trying to get a sense of what Buddhism is. And remembering that this is very old, so I don't think we have professions or occupations the same anymore, not in the West anyway, but it says very simply, an irrigator guides water, fletchers straighten arrows, carpenters bend wood. That is their job. That is what they do. And then it says, wise men shape themselves. And it's not talking about getting physically in shape. It's talking about shaping their hearts and minds. And just for the ladies present, as a female myself, obviously, every time we use the word men or man, we're talking about women as well. So we're going to look now at the Buddha's life story. And I've put there, very simply, what we know, that he left home at 29, he attained awakening at 35, and he died 45 years later, having spent those 45 years wandering and teaching. I think we've already said he was born Siddhartha Gautama, but I've put this slide on because I find it helpful to just put him into historical context. It says he was born before Christ, before the Common Era, about 500 years. But there's about 80 years there between his birth. We don't know when he was born. He was born in India, in what is now modern-day Nepal. But within 100 years, either side of the Buddha, we have Socrates and Confucius, whose names you are probably very familiar with. And I just think it's nice to place him historically, to realize that at the time of his birth, not only is it 500 years before Jesus, but it was a time of great change in human thinking about the world and the human place within it. And I think that just helps perhaps to set that context for him. So we're now going to look at his story, and very little of this will be true. It's not a historically correct story at all. We just don't have these kind of records for the life of the Buddha. So in a sense, what we're going to look at is a made-up story. So why? It's a spiritual story. It's a teaching story. It's symbolic. And it is there to help us to make some sense of events perhaps in our own lives or about our own sense of direction. I know you won't be able to see it that clearly, but I did put a couple on these slides. I've put some of the stone reliefs from Buria Badoa in Indonesia, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, just to remind us how old this story is. It's not a modern story. It's been told like this for a very long time. You get different versions of it. Some are more detailed. However, the Buddha was born to King Sudana, who was the chief of the Shakya clan, and his mother, Queen Maya. And it's said that before she was expecting the Buddha, that she had a dream that a white elephant, and carrying a magnificent white elephant carrying a lotus flower, entered into her side. This is not an immaculate conception, by the way. It was a dream that she had. And as at the time, she went for a consultation on the dream, and it was said that it was indicating there was going to be a big event and probably a very important birth. And sure enough, she became pregnant. And at the end of the pregnancy, towards the end of the pregnancy, she was going back to her parental home to give birth, as was the custom, and not give birth in the marital home. And she was on the way to her father's home when she went into labour. And she gave birth in the Lumbini Gardens. And it is said that the baby came out of her right side. And again, obviously that cannot be accurate. And this baby immediately stood up and walked. What an amazing baby. It walked 7 steps, and it pointed upwards to heaven and downwards to earth, and in a very clear voice announced, I alone am the world-honoured one. And we've already said the Buddha was not a god. And yet immediately here we are with a very fantastical, mystical story of his birth. So what is it pointing to? Well, first, many great religious leaders have these mystical events around their birth. And that's, the stories are there to remind us that their births were significant to humanity. But also it's indicating a spiritual birth, the birth of a new consciousness. Buddhism offers us a way to view ourselves, our lives, our problems with a completely different approach. And so this is symbolically representing that birth of a new consciousness. And also in Buddhism, human life is very precious. And so it is said there are 4 fortunate states. 1, to be born human. It's a precious human life. To be born at a time when Buddhism exists, because it hasn't always, and it's predicted it won't always. To be born in a place where Buddhist practice is available. That may sound such an easy one to us, but that's not true in all countries. And to actually hear the teachings and be interested in them, for them to resonate with you. So Queen Maya, after the birth, went back to the palace, to the marital home with the baby. And it is said that the father, King Sudana, asked, as again was customary, a wise man to come and predict the future of his newborn son. And the wise man, Atisha, came, and it is said he could see what no one else could see, 32 marks on this baby, which indicated to him that this was going to be a religious world leader, very significant religious leader. But he said to the king, he will either be a religious world leader or he will be a great ruler, a great king, which his father wasn't very happy about. Lots of parents always aren't very happy at career choices of their children and try to change the direction that they're going. As we will see in a moment, so did Sudana. Anyway, Prince Siddhartha, he said, was educated to the highest level available at that time. And at that time, there was a lot of education. And so he is said to have been highly intelligent and to have excelled at all his studies and excelled in sports as well, very talented. However, Sudana, the king, did not want Siddhartha to become a religious world leader. And so to try and make sure that didn't happen, he made sure that Prince Siddhartha had everything he could possibly ever want. He lived a very pampered, cloistered life of luxury in the palace. And in fact, in the sutras, the Buddha refers to this himself. He says he had palaces for all the different seasons and that he had different bathing pools with different coloured theme lotus flowers, and that he always had the nicest silks close to his skin. And it's interesting that the king felt that if he gave him everything that he needed, then he would not have any interest in a religious life, in finding out more about the meaning of life. And that perhaps can be a little bit true for us. Often we become interested in Buddhism or other religions during times when we've had something difficult happen. Or just simply that we have that unease, that unrest about, is this it? Which the prince did, because although he had everything he needed, and he was married at quite a young age, again, as was customary, to Yasodhara, and he had a son, Rahula, he was restless. He began to want to leave the palace. So he asked King Sudana if he could visit outside. It's worth just stopping here for a moment, and these stories are symbolic. So, you know, every now and then have a think about what these little bits can mean. We keep our children protected inside a palace, in a sense. We don't let them watch anything they want on YouTube. We don't let them go wherever they want, when they want. We wait until they get to a certain age, and then we allow them these freedoms in bits, because before that, they are inexperienced, they don't understand certain things, so they are vulnerable. And that is absolutely fine to do that. However, if we did that all their lives and never let them go anywhere, then they would never mature. They would never be able to gain the skills to deal with different life experiences. And possibly sometimes it's the same for us. We keep ourselves very comfortable, surrounded by the nicest things that we can have or that we want. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. However, sometimes we can get a bit stuck in our ways and get a bit set, don't want to go here, don't want to go there, don't want to move out of our comfort zone. So in a sense, that's our little palace. Again, is it a problem? Well, it can be when things suddenly change. I think we only have to think about the last couple of years with COVID, which were very difficult for some people. And it was a shock, I think, for us. We hadn't predicted all that. And we only have to look at other world events now at the moment, where it's very, these difficulties arise. And how do we respond to them? Can we respond appropriately to them? Anyway, the king allowed the Buddha to leave the palace with a male servant, and he had attempted to make sure that outside, the king had attempted to make sure that outside the prince would not see anything that disturbed him. But the prince went out on 4 visits, and on each occasion he saw something significant. On the first occasion, he saw an old man on a hobbled over, walking with a stick. And he said to Channa, his male servant, "What is this? Does this happen to everybody? Will this happen to me? Will this happen to my family?" To which the answer was yes. On the next occasion, he saw a sick person. Same questions to Channa. What is this? Does it happen to everybody? Will it happen to me? Could it happen to me? On the third occasion, he saw a corpse. Now, really, he was a highly educated. It's unlikely that he had never seen anybody old, or that he'd never seen anybody sick, or that probably he knew about death. We do. I've deliberately chosen modern pictures for us there. We know on an intellectual level that we will get old and more infirm, and that there is the possibility of becoming very sick, and that we will definitely die. But do we actually face those things? Do we live life knowing those things? How do you do that? Well, this was what the Buddha was concerned about, to truly live our lives knowing that we face old age, sickness, and definitely death. How do we live well and happily, knowing that? Some people think Buddhism is pessimistic because it focuses on these. Is it pessimism, or is it realism? How do we live and honour this precious human life, knowing that those are what await us? And the Buddha went out for the fourth time, and on the fourth occasion, he saw a religious man, a wandering ascetic, which was to set him off on the path that he took, because he decided that he couldn't stay in the palace. He needed to go and find out the answers to this human condition, to this suffering. And for some people, this part of the story is a bit controversial, the fact he left his wife and child. But one, it's symbolic, and two, he left for them, for their greater good. He went because he wanted to find the answers to how we live with the fact that we grow old, sick, and die. So it's said that whilst they were sleeping, he went in and had a last look at them and vowed that he would return, which he did. Again, I've taken, I know it can't be seen very clearly, but I've taken one of the stone reliefs from Borobudur, and what, if you can look more carefully, you could see that the horse's legs are being held over the shoulders of one of the gods to make sure that the sound of the hooves didn't wake up the palace. So the gods have intervened. So again, we've got talk of gods, and yet Buddhism doesn't hold with gods. But one, put it in the context of the time, and two, sometimes when things are going as they're meant to be, it's like the gods are having a hand. And what did he do when he left? Well, he didn't just go wandering around. And again, here's a message to us. He went to the best available teachers that he knew of the time. That people who knew a little bit more than he did, or he thought had the answers, he went to them for training. And it said he trained under two of them. And he learned from them both all that they knew. And he excelled at the things that they taught him. And he was able, through their teachings, to reach meditative states that perhaps we might not believe and certainly are not able to attain. But he managed to do that. And it is said that both teachers said to him, "Stay with me and you can be my successor." So he was offered two successions, and he turned them both down because he had a specific purpose, a specific problem that he was trying to solve. And these meditative states did not answer that question. So he left them both in turn. And he was now on his own. And he practiced some extreme austere practices. It said he was only eating a grain of rice a day. And in the sutras, he talks about his skin falling off and his hair falling out, and the fact he could touch his spine through his stomach. He was that thin. But because he was practicing such austere practices and was so good at it, he did have some followers. He had 5 disciples. But he realized that this wasn't getting him the answer either. All it was doing was killing him. And he realized he was at death's door, and that if he didn't do something different, he would actually die without finding out what he wanted to know. So he decided to take some milk gruel from a passerby, and this appalled his 5 disciples so much that they left him. And he's got no disciples. He's left his family, He's left his palace, he's given up his inheritance, and he's been trying all these things, and he still hasn't found what he wanted to find. And it is said that he sat down underneath a bodhi tree, and he promised, he vowed that he would not get up from there until he had found the answer. So he showed great determination and a course of action for the benefit of himself and his family, and for humanity. And sometimes when we have decided that something needs to be done, we need to show great determination. And it said he sat there for 7 days and 7 nights. And during that period, it is said that Mara, the god of temptation, came along trying to get him to get up and go home. And Mara, first of all, said to him, use the voice of reason, come on, you've done enough now. Go home, be a good son, be a good husband, be a good father. You've done all you can. You can't find the answer, go home. And he continued sitting. And then Mara sent his voluptuous dancing daughters, and they represent distracted by sensual things. Come back to this in a moment. And finally, because he remained seated, Mara sent his warriors to frighten the Buddha. On a much smaller idea, have you ever tried a New Year's resolution when you've determined you're going to do something, or something else, difficult task that you've set yourself? We can go through those phases, can we not? Of saying, I've done my best, I've had enough, I'm not doing anymore, I'm giving up. Or, if we're trying to give something up, like chocolate at Lent or something like that, just have a friend tempting you with it, very easy. And ultimately, underneath any big changes comes fear. So, on the 8th morning, it is said he awoke. This is in the northern traditions. He awoke, and on looking at the morning star, he awakened and became enlightened. And it's said, his words were, how wonderful, how miraculous, all beings, but all beings are fully endowed with the wisdom and power of the Tathagata. But sadly, human beings, due to sticky attachments, are not aware of it. Human beings, he's saying, all of us have this wisdom, we're endowed with this wisdom to see what he saw. He, first of all, thought that what he had learned, and he never really truly said what it was that he saw. He just later went on to teach a path to reach it. But he thought it was just too much. He couldn't possibly explain it to other people. And he wasn't going to teach. But again, Lord Brahma came down, took a roll and said to him, you must go and teach those with just a little dust in their eyes. So with that in mind, he found his 5 disciples and he gave them the first teaching, which is called the first turning of the wheel. And we will look at that in more detail when we have the lesson on the 4 noble truths. But part of that first lesson was the teaching of the middle way, which is the name of the Buddhist Society journal, The Middle Way. If we think, what did he mean by the middle way and how is that useful to us? Well, first of all, he'd lived a life of luxury, and then that hadn't given him any answers. Then he practically starved himself to death, took an extreme, and he said to his 5 disciples, neither were the way to go, the middle way. And the middle way for us now, it is asking us, when we have a situation, that we look at a situation in the round. We don't just look at one side of it, but we look at both sides, or all sides, not both sides, all sides of a situation. So the middle way, we'll come back to that again, is a very important teaching. And he taught for 40 years. And on his deathbed, it is said, his last words were, impermanent are all compounded things, strive on heedfully. Okay, well, I have come to the end of the Buddha's life story, but before I stop sharing the slides, I just wanted to, I can come back to this later, but I'm going to be setting homework every week. I won't be taking it in and marking it, or even checking that you've done it, but I will be setting little tasks to do. Each lesson will build on the next one, but if you do miss a lesson, like I say, you should be able to, if you register, catch up and watch it at a different time, but they will build on one another. And I've just got 2 tasks between now and next Monday. And the first one is, you may want to look at the main points of the Buddha story and just think about them and ponder their particular relevance to you personally. The Buddha story is very easy to find out there. And in fact, I think on bite size, at all the different key stages, you've got different variations of the Buddha story. The other task I wanted you to do was to sit relaxed in an armchair for about 10 minutes minimum. 5-10 minutes minimum. So here you go. You can sit for longer, without any distractions, without your smartphone, without a book, without a radio, without TV, and just sit. Nice and relaxed, not sat bolt up, right? You're sat in an armchair, so you can sit relaxed. See what you notice. Outside, around you, and sights and sounds, but internally as well, what you notice inside. Try and avoid talking about it to yourself. Try and avoid an internal commentary, or if you have an internal commentary, which I think you will, notice what it's saying. And see if you notice that restlessness. So if you sat in a nice, cozy armchair and yet you begin to feel restless, do you? Maybe you don't. Do you notice that perhaps the urge to pick something up and entertain yourself? This is something I do quite regularly, and I find it extremely difficult not to pick my phone up and check emails and texts, etc. So just see how you get on. Okay, so we're coming up to nearly past. I'm going to stop there. And if you have any questions that you want to put in the chat to Lavinia.
Hello, good evening, Olwen. Thank you for this class. Sorry. I do have a couple of questions in the chat for you. The first one is asking, first of all, thank you for this introductory lesson. I would like to know the meaning of Tathagata. If you could elaborate a little bit, thank you.
Tathagata, it's a term that the Buddha often used to refer to himself. So it is the title for an enlightened being. And I think actually it means a coming and someone who comes and someone who goes. So he actually used that to talk about himself.
Thanks so much. The next question asks, I understand the basic philosophy of Buddhism, but not everyone is that kind and helpful all the time. There are people who try to harm you without you doing no harm to them. They envy you and try to defame you. How to manage this in real life, and how Buddhism and what Buddhism says about these things?
That's a very interesting question. Buddhist training is asking us to cultivate two aspects. One is wisdom and one is compassion. And as we begin to develop that wisdom, we understand a little bit more about our own inner workings, and therefore, because we all share this humanity, that of others. And with that, we develop compassion for ourselves and for others. And so as you go on in the training, you can be a little bit more forgiving for the behavior of others, because we have a better understanding of it. That's not to say that as a Buddhist practitioner, you become a doormat, that, you know, anybody can say or do anything to you and that's okay. It's not saying that. But hopefully, as we get more training, we ourselves are able to cope with the difficult things that other people do, because they do. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's not true. People don't, because they do, but that we can manage that better. We can and have a little bit more understanding of them. So I hope that helped. This is very nerve-wracking. I don't know what I might get asked next.
Thank you so much. I do not have any more questions for the moment. I don't know if anybody wants to send another message in the chat.
Okay, well that I'm happy with that, but please, if you do have any questions, register and put them into the folder or whatever that will be available when you go in and you've registered. So we can look at them either week 8, or if they're relevant to next week, we can look at them next week. So just before we go, if I can just go back, because we've got time, that I just wanted. I've asked you to do some tasks, and I will ask that there will be some things, big or small, suggested each week. And I just thought, well, we've got a few minutes. Why? Why is this important in Buddhism? And how do you fill a sieve with water? Well, you can't, can you? Looking at that, the water just drips through it. But there is a story of a group of people who are interested in Buddhism had asked a teacher to come and visit them, and he did, and he gave them some words of advice, and he said, meditate twice a day and restrain your emotional reactions to things. And he said the whole process is like filling up a sieve with water. And they mulled this over after he'd gone, and one or two of them got quite annoyed and thinking he's just being silly. You can't fill a sieve with water. But one of them decided that it was a woman, that she would go to the teacher and ask him for more information. What did he mean? And so he took her along to the seashore, and he threw the sieve into the sea, and of course it filled up with the sea water and sank. And he said, this is what the teachings are like. We need to be thinking about them and looking at how they're relevant to us and working with them and using our bodies with them as the armchair exercise. So hopefully, if you weren't considering doing those tasks, you might now. Now I've given some reason behind that. Okay, well, it's been very nice to see so many of you, and I hope that I see you again next week. And whilst I remember, there are no classes Thursday and Friday. The next classes, if you're going to go to any others, the next classes at the Buddhist Society are on Monday. That's because of the long bank holiday, which I hope everybody has a nice time. I hope the weather's nice. Okay, so thank you very much. And hopefully I will see you next week.